The scent of rain-dampened cedar and the sharp tang of metal on whetstone hung heavy in the humid Edo air. Kenji's plane moved across the plank of hinoki cypress with a practiced rhythmic whisper, shavings curling away like pale incense smoke. His focus was absolute, a mask of calm diligence he wore as comfortably as his dust-stained work coat. Mid-20s, lean and wiry, his strength was deceptive, honed by years apprenticed to Master Toshiro. Few noticed the sharp intelligence in his observant eyes, usually kept lowered, or the faint white scar tracing his left temple, hidden beneath dark hair, a memento of a past injustice that simmered beneath the quiet surface. His workshop, tucked away in a bustling artisan district of Kanda, was small but orderly. Tools hung in precise rows, wood stacked neatly. Outside, the city lived loud, the cries of vendors, the clatter of wooden sandals on packed earth, the distant rumble of a merchant's cart. It was a world of strict lines. Samurai above, merchants rising, artisans like himself and farmers below, all navigating the intricate dance of obligation and status. Kenji navigated it with quiet deference, his outward persona a shield for the controlled righteous anger that burned within him. He saw the daily slights, the casual cruelty of power, a rice broker short-changing a desperate farmer, a samurai's retainer cuffing a child who stumbled too close. Each instance pricked at the old wound left by his master's ruin. He planed the wood smooth, the repetitive motion a balm. Then, through the open front of the workshop, he saw her. Hana, the weaver's daughter from the next alley, her steps light as she carried a bolt of indigo-dyed cotton. Her face held a quiet strength, a gentle integrity that drew his gaze whenever she passed. A simple greeting was all that ever passed between them, a slight bow, a murmured acknowledgement, yet her presence was a pocket of warmth in his carefully ordered, shadowed world. He admired her skill, the intricate patterns she coaxed from thread, a different kind of creation from his own shaping of wood. A life like hers, honest and open, seemed a distant, impossible dream. He turned back to his work, the plane's whisper resuming, but the image lingered. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Kenji swept the wood shavings from the floor. The air cooled, carrying the scent of charcoal fires being lit for evening meals. He was preparing to close when the commotion began nearby. Raised voices, a woman's sharp cry of distress, the heavy thud of something overturned. Kenji paused, broom still, listening. He recognized the voice of Old Man Ito, the kindly owner of the small tea shop at the corner, his tone escalating from pleading to desperate anger. Kenji moved quietly to the edge of his workshop, peering down the narrow alley. Two burly men, bearing the crest of the wealthy merchant Okami on their jackets, stood over Ito's overturned tea stand. Ceramic cups lay shattered on the ground, green tea leaves scattered like fallen hopes. Ito, small and frail, clutched his chest, his face pale with shock and fury. Okami's men were demanding payment for a debt Ito insisted he didn't owe, a familiar tactic of predatory lending Kenji knew Okami favored. Then a figure emerged from a nearby palanquin, stepping disdainfully around the debris. Lord Ishikawa. A local samurai official, impeccably dressed, his face a mask of cultured indifference. Though his eyes held a predatory chill, Kenji recognized instantly. Ishikawa nodded curtly to Okami's men, his gaze sweeping over Ito with utter contempt. "Settle this quickly," he commanded, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Such disturbances are unseemly." He didn't even glance at the ruined shop. Kenji's hand tightened on the broom handle until his knuckles were white. He saw his own master's face in Old Man Ito's despair, the same helplessness against the casual cruelty of partnered greed between merchant and official. Master Toshiro, ruined by fabricated debts orchestrated by Okami, with Ishikawa's silent, profitable approval. The scar on Kenji's temple throbbed, a phantom echo of the blow he'd taken defending his master years ago. That night the resolve hardened within him. The city slept, but the shadow Carpenter had work to do, not work of hammer and nail, but of balance and consequence. He returned to his workshop, not for rest, but to select different tools, fine chisels, a small pry bar, dark clothing, and a small perfectly carved wooden sparrow. The injustice against Ito would not stand unanswered. Current part characters 244 and 36, total characters 4 to 725. Under the sliver of a new moon, Edo transformed. Familiar streets became canyons of shadow, the shuttered shops silent witnesses. Kenji moved with the fluid grace of smoke, his soft-soled tabi making no sound on the packed earth or the occasional rooftop tile. He knew these alleys, these walls, these hidden passages as intimately as the grain of wood. His destination, Okami's main storehouse near the river, a place rumoured to hold more than just legitimate goods. He bypassed the drowsing watchman with ease, scaling a low wall into the compound. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of spices, stored rice and something else. Saltpeter? He located the small office where Okami kept his meticulous, often fraudulent records. The lock, simple but sturdy, yielded quickly to a thin, cleverly shaped piece of metal, a modified marking gauge. Inside, moonlight illuminated stacks of ledgers. Kenji worked swiftly, his fingers deft. He didn't steal money. He didn't destroy wantonly. His purpose was disruption, confusion, the subtle sowing of chaos within the corrupt merchant's operations. He found the ledger detailing Okami's loans, Ito's name clearly marked with exorbitant interest. With precise strokes of a fine brush and carefully mixed ink, he altered delivery addresses for a large incoming shipment, redirecting valuable silks meant for Okami to a non-existent address across the city. He adjusted figures in the loan ledger, subtly shifting decimal points, creating discrepancies that would cause headaches and scrutiny later. It was detailed, painstaking work, requiring intense focus. Before leaving, he placed the small wooden sparrow on the altered ledger, a silent signature. He slipped back into the night as unseen as he arrived, the grim satisfaction of action taken, warring with the ever-present knot of fear in his gut. The risk was immense. Discovery meant ruin, perhaps death, but the memory of Ito's face, of his master's despair, fueled him. Days later, whispers filtered through the Kanda district. Okami was furious, ranting about incompetent clerks and lost shipments. A significant delivery of silks had vanished, redirected by an inexplicable error in his own records. There were rumors of accounting problems, officials asking pointed questions about his loan practices after several inconsistencies were flagged. Old man Ito, surprisingly, found his alleged debt suddenly reduced, attributed to a clerical error Okami grudgingly acknowledged to avoid further scrutiny. A small victory, but Kenji knew it was only a skirmish. He saw Hana again a few days later near the well. She offered him a shy smile, her eyes warm. "Kenji-san," she began, her voice soft. "My father's loom, the main beam has developed a crack. We worry it might break. Could you look at it?" His heart gave an unexpected leap. Of course, Hana-san. It would be my honor. He went to her small house that evening. The rhythmic clatter of the loom filled the main room, where her father worked diligently. Hana served him tea, her movements graceful. While examining the heavy wooden beam, Kenji felt a sense of peace settle over him, a stark contrast to the tension of his nighttime excursions. This was the life he craved: honest work, quiet connection. He carefully assessed the damage, explaining the necessary repairs to Hana and her father. His hands, usually shaping wood or manipulating locks, felt grounded, securing the cracked beam. As he worked, he chatted quietly with Satoshi, his potter friend, later that week at a simple noodle stall. Satoshi, ever pragmatic, grumbled about rising taxes and Lord Ishikawa's latest levy for neighborhood improvements that seemed to benefit only the samurai residences. "He bleeds us dry," Kenji, Satoshi sighed, slurping his noodles. "And merchants like Okami get richer." Kenji listened, absorbing the details, storing away the frustrations of the common folk. Satoshi's complaints, Hana's quiet strength, they were reminders of why the Shadow Carpenter existed. But the closer he felt to Hana, the heavier the weight of his secret became. What right did he have to even speak to her, carrying such danger within him? The thought was a cold counterpoint to the warmth her smile evoked. Lord Ishikawa drummed his fingers on the polished surface of his desk. His normally impassive face was clouded with irritation. Okami's recent troubles were an annoyance, potentially disrupting their lucrative, discreet arrangements. More concerning were the whispers of some meddler, this Shadow Carpenter, leaving foolish wooden tokens. Childish pranks, perhaps, but the precision of the interference suggested something more. Okami's redirected silk shipment, the specific alterations in his loan books, it wasn't random vandalism. It was targeted. Ishikawa issued quiet orders, increased patrols in certain districts, discreet inquiries among informants. He needed to know who dared interfere. He suspected someone with insider knowledge, perhaps a disgruntled former clerk of Okami's. The idea of a mere artisan being responsible didn't cross his mind. Kenji sensed the shift in the atmosphere. More watchmen patrolled the streets at night, their lanterns casting longer, more probing shadows. He knew Ishikawa was reacting. It meant his actions were having an effect, but it also meant the danger was escalating exponentially. He needed to be more careful, yet the whispers of Ishikawa's other dealings, rumors of hoarded rice driving up prices as winter approached, spurred him onward. He planned his next move meticulously. Ishikawa controlled several granaries, officially for samurai stipends, but Kenji suspected hoarding for profit. Accessing them was far riskier than Okami's storehouse. He spent nights observing patrol patterns, studying the granary structures from afar. One night, under the cover of a fierce autumn rainstorm that muffled sounds and reduced visibility, he made his move. Slipping past the guards was harder this time. Inside the vast, echoing granary, the air thick with the dusty scent of rice, he didn't steal. Instead, he located a section where Ishikawa stored rice far exceeding official allotments. Using his tools, he subtly damaged several support beams beneath this section, weakening them just enough. He also pried open a small ventilation grate near the back, exposing the stored grain to the damp night air. Spoilage would be slow but certain. As he worked, his chisel slipped on the damp wood, gouging slightly deeper than intended. He paused, listening intently. Nothing. Before leaving, he found a loose floorboard and tucked beneath it a small folded piece of paper, a fragment of a shipping manifest he'd glimpsed during his reconnaissance, bearing an unusual seal he didn't recognize but felt significant. A breadcrumb, perhaps, for later. He left no sparrow this time. The risk was too high. The weeks that followed were tense. News spread of spoilage discovered in one of Lord Ishikawa's granaries, attributed to negligence and the recent storms. Ishikawa was reportedly furious, punishing the guards, but the incident cast doubt on his competence. More importantly for Kenji, the price of rice in the market stabilized slightly, the threat of artificial scarcity eased for now. But the pressure in the Kanda district remained high. Ishikawa's men were more visible, their inquiries more pointed. One evening they hassled Satoshi, questioning him aggressively about any unusual activities he might have witnessed. Satoshi, shaken but defiant, told them nothing. Kenji heard about it later, a cold dread settling in his stomach. His actions were putting his friends at risk. The weight of his double life felt heavier than ever. Hana, too, seemed quieter, her usual warmth tinged with a subtle worry when she looked at him. One afternoon, while Kenji was adding a final polish to the repaired loom beam in her house, she spoke hesitantly. "Kenji-san," she murmured, not meeting his eyes, "you seem tired lately, and sometimes late at night I hear sounds from your workshop when I thought you would be resting." Kenji's hands stilled on the wood. He forced a calm he didn't feel. "Just catching up on orders, Hana-san. The end of the season is busy." Her gaze finally met his, clear and searching. And this... She held out her hand. Resting on her palm was a small, exquisitely carved wooden sparrow, identical to the one he'd left in Okami's office. "I found it near your wood scraps this morning. It's beautifully made. Is it a new design you are working on?" His blood ran cold. He had been careless, dropped one of the spares he kept hidden. He struggled to keep his voice even. "Ah, yes, just experimenting." He couldn't read her expression. Was it simple curiosity or suspicion? The air crackled with unspoken questions. He finished his work quickly, the earlier piece shattered. Her perception, usually a quality he admired, now felt like a spotlight threatening to expose him. He saw the worry deepen in her eyes as he left, a silent plea for honesty he couldn't grant. The chasm between his two lives felt terrifyingly wide. Lord Ishikawa paced his private chambers, the silken rustle of his kimono the only sound besides the crackling fire. The spoiled rice was a financial blow and an embarrassment. The persistent interference, the damned wooden bird Okami had described, it pointed to a deliberate campaign. But by whom? His informants had turned up nothing concrete. He poured himself sake, his cold eyes narrowed in thought. The disruptions had begun shortly after that incident with the old tea seller, Ito. And who lived nearby? Artisans, insignificant, resentful ants. He recalled the face of the quiet carpenter's apprentice from years ago, the one who had foolishly tried to defend Master Toshiro. Kenji, that was his name. Still working in the same district. It was a long shot, unlikely. A simple craftsman possessing such cunning? Yet, Toshiro's ruin had been Ishikawa's doing, indirectly. Could resentment fester for so long, bloom into such calculated action? He dismissed the thought as improbable, yet filed the name away. He needed more information, something concrete. Meanwhile, Kenji felt the net tightening. He knew Ishikawa wouldn't let the granary incident rest. He needed to understand the bigger picture, the meaning of that strange seal on the manifest fragment he'd hidden. Using his skills for subtle observation, eavesdropping near tea-houses frequented by merchants' clerks, piecing together overheard whispers, he began to uncover the outlines of a larger conspiracy. Smuggling. Not just luxury goods, but potentially firearms, judging by the mention of saltpeter and hushed references to Nagasaki and foreign contacts. Ishikawa wasn't just greedy. He was involved in something far more dangerous, something that threatened more than just local livelihoods. This discovery shifted his purpose. It was no longer just about settling old scores or local justice. This was bigger. He retrieved the manifest fragment from the granary floorboard during another risky night visit. He needed proof, something undeniable to expose Ishikawa completely. He learned Ishikawa was expecting a crucial clandestine meeting soon, likely involving his smuggling partners at a secluded warehouse by the Sumida River. This was his chance. He had to find the main ledger, the key that would unlock the entire conspiracy. It would likely be kept not at the warehouse, but in Ishikawa's residence, the most dangerous place of all. The night of Ishikawa's riverside meeting arrived, cloaked in a damp river fog that clung to the edges of Edo. Kenji had made his preparations. He knew the layout of Ishikawa's residential compound from careful observation, the patrol routes, the blind spots, the location of the study where such sensitive documents would likely be kept. He had also sent an anonymous, carefully worded message to a captain of the City Watch, known for his rigid adherence to duty and his quiet rivalry with Ishikawa, hinting at suspicious activity at the Lord's residence that very night. A gamble, but necessary. He was clad in dark, close-fitting clothes, his tools secured silently at his waist. As he prepared to slip out of his workshop into the concealing fog, a soft voice stopped him. "Kenji-san?" Hana stood at the entrance, her silhouette framed against the dim light from the street. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry and a dawning certainty. In her hand she held not the sparrow this time, but one of his specialized thin chisels, the one he rarely used for carpentry. "This isn't for wood, is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The nights you are gone, the trouble that follows Okami-san and now Lord Ishikawa, the sparrow I found. Kenji-san, what are you doing?" He froze. There was no deflecting this time, no easy lie. The genuine fear in her eyes, the plea for truth, broke through his carefully constructed walls. He looked at her, the woman who represented the simple, honest life he yearned for, and knew he owed her something, even if it was only a dangerous fragment of the truth. "Hana-san," he began, his voice low and urgent, the fog swirling around them. "There is injustice. Men like Ishikawa, they crush people like your family, like old man Ito, like my master was crushed. Someone has to balance the scales." He avoided the term shadow carpenter, avoided specifics of his methods. "Ishikawa is involved in something dangerous, something that harms many. Tonight, I have a chance to expose him, to stop him." He gestured towards the night. "It's dangerous. I didn't want you involved, didn't want this darkness near you." Her eyes searched his face, filled with a mixture of fear, understanding, and something else, perhaps a flicker of shared anger. "Be careful, Kenji-san," she breathed, clutching the chisel tightly before pressing it back into his hand. "Please, be careful." Her acceptance, her fear for him rather than of him, struck him harder than any accusation could have. It strengthened his resolve, but also sharpened the ache of what he might be leaving behind. He gave her a solemn nod, a promise he desperately hoped he could keep, and melted into the fog-laden night. Ishikawa's compound was unnervingly quiet. The fog muffled sounds and reduced visibility, aiding Kenji's approach but also potentially concealing unexpected guards. He scaled the outer wall at a pre-scouted point, landing silently in the manicured garden. He moved like a wraith along the edge of the Engawa, avoiding the gravel paths. The main house was dark, most servants likely retired or accompanying Ishikawa to the riverside meeting. He reached the study. The shoji screen lock was intricate, designed more for status than high security, but it required delicate work. His specialized tools, guided by years of sensitive woodworking, manipulated the mechanism. A soft click echoed in the stillness. He slid the screen open just enough to slip inside. The study was opulent, scrolls hanging on the walls, a heavy desk dominating the room. The air smelled faintly of ink and expensive incense. Kenji wasted no time. He knew where Ishikawa kept his most private documents, a hidden compartment behind a loose wall panel, disguised as part of the decorative alcove. He located the seam, barely visible, and used a thin blade to release the catch. Inside lay several bound ledgers. He quickly identified the correct one, its cover simpler than the others, its pages filled with coded entries and notations that matched the seal on his manifest fragment. This was it. Proof of the smuggling operation, names, dates, payoffs. He tucked it securely inside his tunic. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had the evidence. As he turned to leave, a floorboard creaked softly behind him. He spun around, instantly low and alert. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway he'd just entered. One of Ishikawa's personal samurai guards, sword already drawn, alerted perhaps by a sixth sense or a pre-arranged signal. Kenji hadn't anticipated a guard inside the study itself. Ishikawa's suspicion had run deeper than he thought. This wasn't just a trap. It was an execution order waiting for an intruder. The guard lunged, the katana whistling through the air. Kenji reacted instinctively, throwing a small inkstone from the desk, causing the guard to flinch momentarily. It wasn't a fight Kenji could win. He needed to escape, to get the ledger out. Kenji didn't try to fight the guard directly. He used the study's furniture, the heavy desk, a standing screen, as obstacles, dodging the flashing steel. His goal was the shoji screen leading back to the garden. He knew the compound's layout. The guard likely didn't expect him to flee deeper into the residence. Feinting towards the garden exit, he suddenly ducked low and darted towards an inner corridor. The guard, surprised by the unexpected move, followed, shouting an alarm. Kenji raced through the darkened corridors of the sleeping house, his knowledge of building structures his only advantage. He could hear more guards approaching, alerted by the shouts. He needed a diversion, something significant. He reached the kitchen area, spotting the large water barrels kept full for fire safety. With a surge of desperate strength, he tipped one over, sending a cascade of water flooding across the polished wooden floor. He scrambled up onto a crossbeam, just as the pursuing guards slipped and stumbled in the sudden deluge, their shouts turning to curses. He moved through the rafters, silent and unseen, heading towards the rear of the compound. He could hear the sounds of arrival at the main gate, the city watch captain alerted by his earlier message. Perfect timing. He dropped down into a deserted servants' passage near the back wall, the precious ledger still secure. He scaled the rear wall and dropped into the alley outside, melting back into the dense fog just as lights flared within the compound and authoritative voices began issuing commands. He didn't stop running until he was several blocks away. His lungs burning, adrenaline singing in his veins. He leaned against a cold, damp wall, gasping for breath. He had escaped. The evidence was out. Ishikawa's carefully constructed world was about to crumble. But Kenji knew with chilling certainty that his own life, the quiet existence of the Kanda Carpenter, was over. He had been seen, albeit briefly, inside the residence. The guard would describe him. Ishikawa, or whoever remained of his network, would hunt him. He could never go back to the workshop, never see Hana or Satoshi safely again. The victory felt hollow, heavy with the price he now had to pay. The fog seemed to press in, no longer a shield, but the shroud of his former life. News travels fast in the crowded wards of Edo, even news officials try to suppress. Within days, the whispers became stunned pronouncements. Lord Ishikawa was ruined. The City Watch, acting on anonymous information, had raided his residence and the riverside warehouse simultaneously. Evidence of a massive smuggling ring, dealing in forbidden firearms and bleeding the city through illicit trade, was undeniable. Names of other officials were implicated. Ishikawa, facing disgrace and certain execution, was permitted the honorable path, seppuku within his compound walls. The merchant Okami, stripped of his wealth and status, vanished, likely into the lowest depths of the city's underbelly. In Kanda, there was quiet relief. Old Man Ito's tea shop slowly recovered. Satoshi, hearing the news, spat on the ground where Ishikawa's palanquin used to pass. "Good riddance," he muttered, though he occasionally wondered aloud what had happened to Kenji, who had disappeared without a word around the same time. His workshop remained shuttered, dust gathering on the silent tools. Kenji, miles away, heard fragmented versions of the news from travelling merchants and pilgrims. He kept moving, working odd jobs in small villages, his carpentry skills earning him food and temporary shelter. He kept his head down, his past a carefully guarded secret. The anonymity was a kind of safety, but it was a lonely existence. The scar on his temple seemed more prominent now, a constant reminder. Months bled into a year. He found himself in a small coastal village, repairing fishing boats. The salt air and the simple rhythm of the waves brought a measure of peace, but the memory of Edo, of Hana, was a persistent ache. One evening, watching the sunset paint the ocean crimson, he took out a small block of driftwood and began to carve. His fingers, sure and steady, coaxed a familiar shape from the wood, a small, smooth sparrow. Just as he finished, a familiar voice, soft but clear over the sound of the waves, spoke his name. "Kenji-san?" He looked up, his heart stopping. Hana stood there, her travelling cloak dusty, her face thinner, but her eyes holding the same quiet strength he remembered. She must have searched for him, followed rumours, clung to a desperate hope. Tears welled in Hana's eyes as she looked at him, truly looked at him. The deeper lines etched around his eyes, the guardedness that hadn't quite left his posture, the familiar intensity that still burned beneath the surface. "I heard stories," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Whispers of a skilled carpenter travelling south, helping people, asking for little in return. I hoped—" Kenji slowly got to his feet, the carved sparrow clutched in his hand. He had dreamed of this moment, yet now that it was here, words failed him. The gulf between his past life and his present reality seemed immense. "Hana-san," he finally managed, his voice rough. "It is not safe for you here, with me. Is anywhere truly safe when injustice flourishes?" she countered softly, stepping closer. "I understand now, Kenji-san, what you did, why you had to leave. The people in Kanda, they don't know it was you, but things are better, quieter. Okami's grip is broken." She looked down at the sparrow in his hand. "You continued your work, didn't you? Just differently." He couldn't deny it. Even in his exile, he hadn't been able to stand idle when he saw blatant wrongs. Small acts, quiet interventions, never leaving a signature, but always trying to balance the scales where he could. "My life is this now," he said, gesturing vaguely at the sea, the simple village, always looking over my shoulder, never settling. It is no life to share. The longing in his voice was unmistakable, betraying his words. Hana reached out, her fingers gently brushing the wooden sparrow. "Perhaps," she said, her gaze meeting his, steady and unwavering, "a life of purpose, even a difficult one, is better than a safe life shrouded in ignorance. I made my choice when I let you walk into the fog that night, Kenji-san. I worried, yes, but I also understood." He looked at her, truly saw the resolve in her eyes, the quiet acceptance of the path he walked. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long eased, replaced by a fragile, burgeoning hope. It wouldn't be easy. Danger would always be a shadow at their heels. But perhaps he didn't have to walk this path entirely alone. He opened his hand, offering her the small wooden sparrow. "It means vigilance," he said quietly, "and hope." She took it, her fingers closing around the smooth wood. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, but she was smiling. "Then let us watch over each other," she whispered, "and hold on to hope together." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, but for the first time in a long time, the shadows didn't feel quite so cold, quite so lonely. The struggle wasn't over. The fight for justice never truly ended. But here, on this quiet shore, a new, uncertain chapter had begun. They stayed in the coastal village for a time, Kenji working on the boats, Hana finding work with her weaving skills, quickly earning respect for her artistry and quiet diligence. They lived simply, cautiously. Kenji never